Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 18 of our reading of A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent. It is a book by Marie Brennan. Okay, as always, we're going to go over the copyright information, which is right here. It says A Natural History of Dragons, copyright 2013 by Brennan Noonschwander. All rights reserved. Interior illustrations by Todd Lockwell, maps by Rhys Davies, and designed by Greg Collins. Also, we found this guy, Zangrit Mott, who apparently was a king who wished to become a dragon, but he made a pact with a demon or something. You know, all that good stuff. So, apparently there's a bunch of information that we are going to find out today about this and find out why poor Lady Trent is being haunted by this dragon, human, demon thing. Okay. You must be cleansed, the priest said, with an air of finality. It should have been done when you came back from the ruins. I said so at the time, but we will do it now. The temple's obsession with washing had not been part of my nursery maid's tales. She was too convinced that their followers were all dirty and foul, but I knew of it from other sources. If this was the price of laying Menkem's fears at rest, and it was a small price to pay. Tucking my pencil into the journal, I held up my hands. Where's your basin? It required rather more than a basin. Menken set me to gather Jacob, Mr. Wilker, and Astoria. The latter certainly needed purification along with me, and it was judged best to give a scrub to the gentleman as well, just to be on the safe side. Lord Hilford could be cleansed when he returned. By the time I had done this, somehow the entire village knew what was afoot. This may have been the Drustanev gossip at work, but I think it was more likely Menkem had said something the night before. Quite a crowd of them gathered outside the tabernacle, including Dagmira. I'm told this is to be a full bath, I said to her. The notion was rather appealing. I never felt quite properly clean after using the sauna. Well, will that be done inside the tabernacle? Her look was scandalized, as if she sincerely hoped I had botched my Vestrani and meant to say something else entirely. Of course not. I'm surprised he lets you in there, heathens as you are. No, it has to be living water. Reciting scripture in a loud voice, men can begin leading the crowd forth. Living water? I repeated, unsure if I had heard her correctly. Dagmira nodded, but seemed uninclined to explain. I translated the words into Skirling for my companions, and Jacob stumbled over a rock. Living water? Oh, surely they don't mean... Yes, they do. I followed his gaze and saw the icy stream up ahead. No amount of protest could convince the priest to back down. His rural theology included nothing that would cover this situation, but he was determined to use what little he had. Jacob, whose scholarly interests had at one point included religious history, mustered some very learned-sounding arguments that lost half their force when translated into broken Vestrani, to no avail. Nothing would do but that we were dropped into the deepest part of the stream, where the water could cover every last inch of our bodies. Every last inch, I realized halfway through the argument, that Jacob was less concerned with the cold and more concerned with the spectating villagers who were about to see his wife stripped naked in front of them, and I had thought the sauna was bad. Menkem seemed to believe that this being a ritual affair meant it didn't matter who saw me. I could only chalk that up to rural practicality. Since Surely any religion that required women to sit apart from men in tabernacle ought not to approve of nudity in mixed company. My willingness to tolerate their superstition only went so far. You have a choice, I told Mencken firmly. You can bathe me publicly with my clothes on, or you can bathe me privately with my clothes off. You can bathe me not at all. But I am not removing a stitch out in the open, like this, nor as long as any of these other men are around. My gesture took in everyone but Jacob and the priest himself. I would have excluded Menchem too, except that I was fairly certain the ritual required him to be present. The priest did not like it, but Jacob and I stood firm with Mr. Wilker's support. I rather thought the latter less than eager to expose himself to the locals, either. Finally, it was agreed that the villagers would be sent away, except for a few assistants. Those would help Menchem bathe Astamir and my two companions, after which Jacob and Dagmira would bathe me under cover of one of our tents. I accordingly gave them their privacy. Unfortunately, this left me to sit alone on a line of barrels with Dagmira, who glared at me. You bring trouble. Several possible responses rose to my tongue, all of them defensive. Menchem's story had placed a worm of doubt in my heart, though, and it gave me pause. Even without evil spirits in the picture, we were a disruption to this village. For a good cause, of course. Despite our awkward start, we had gathered a great deal of valuable information ranging from simple matters like a reliable description of a mating flight to my observation of the tiny valves in the wing membranes. But what did that matter to Dagmira? It would bring us a claim in Skirland. Well, it would bring the gentlemen a claim once they presented our findings to the philosophers. Colloquium. And of course, I had the satisfaction of the scholar uncovering things never before known to man. That meant nothing in Drusenev, though. They had our coin, I told myself. Lord Hilford had paid for any number of things in the course of arranging this expedition. Much of that, though, had gone to the missing Gritelkin, and this Boyer above him was what remained sufficient compensation for all the disruption our presence caused. These thoughts had occupied me long enough in silence that Dagmira made a disgusted noise and looked away. She turned back, however. Then I said in a small voice, I am sorry. The surprise in her eyes would have made me laugh had I been feeling less low. What we're doing, well, I tell myself it is for the benefit of all mankind, and I do believe that's true, but the benefit to you is very distant, I must admit. Is there something that could make it better? Should I tell Lord Hilford to distribute more payment? The offer produced a wealth of conflicting reactions in her face, less than half of them positive. Finally, Dagmira said bluntly, Get rid of the dragons. Get rid of them? I shot to my feet appalled. She flung one impatient hand at the sky. They eat our sheep. They attack the shepherds. What good do they do us? As my childhood obsession with dragons welled up in my throat, choking me, but there, I was not capable of having this conversation in Vestrani, where my vocabulary lacked the word magnificent. Perhaps it was for the best. The struggle to convey my meaning gave my brain time to catch up. Beauty and splendor are all very well, but they put no food on the table for a mountain peasant, nor do they keep the house warm in winter. But I could hardly commit myself to their eradication either. Suddenly fierce, I said, I cannot do anything about the sheep. Dragons must eat, just as wolves and bears and humans must. But we will find out what is making them attack the shepherds and put a stop to it. This is one thing our science can do for you. It was the same promise I had made to Chatskel during my night with the smugglers, and I had yet to fulfill it. But my words then had been driven by a desire to get away safely. This time my motivation was quite the reverse. I did not want to go anywhere, not when going would mean admitting defeat and abandoning these people to further attacks and further deaths. And so my promise carried a silent echo. I would not leave until I had made good on my word, even if it meant freezing to death in a Vistrani winter. By the by the pursing of her lips, Dagmira was less than entirely confident, but she accepted it with a grudging nod. That would help, as would laying their minds to rest on the matter of this curse. Whether it was superstition or not, Jacob came wet-haired and irritable to summon me, and together we went back to the stream where one of our tents had been pitched across the flow. It was not large enough that I could stand anywhere both sheltered and dry. Mouth set tight, I took off my shoes and stockings, drew a deep breath, and waded in. The first touch of water against my bare foot was enough to persuade me that the sauna was a splendid device when the alternative was the frigid stream. It only got worse as I went deeper. My skirts plastered themselves against my calves like clammy hands, and my toes going numb enough to render my footing uncertain. I counted my blessings, though. The stream here was barely deep enough to submerge me lying down, and rose no higher than my knees when standing. I ducked into the tent, crouched to fit under, and stretched under the stretched canvas. Dagmira followed me, and Jacob stood outside to receive my clothing. I would have preferred it the other way around, but Mencken insisted we Skirlings were all heretics, after all, and could not be trusted to do the right thing. Any shyness I might have felt was vanquished by the desire to finish this quickly. I stripped off dress, petticoat, stays, and shift in record time. While Mencken prayed outside, Dagmira stopped me, though, as I steeled myself to descend into the water. Your hair, she said. What of it? I snapped, my teeth chattering. Goose pimples had sprung up all over until my skin felt as pebbly as a dragon's. The water must touch everything, she said, turning me about so she could drag the pins from my hair. It tumbled over my shoulders, a warm touch I was sorely reluctant to ruin, but delay only made things worse, and so the moment Dagmira's fingers finished their rough combing, I sucked in a deep breath and dropped. The sheer appalling shock of it caused me to lose most of that air an instant later. I think I yelled, though I cannot be sure. I know I surged part way up again, only to be met by Dagmira's hand mercilessly forcing me back down. By then I had very little air, but rationality had managed to recover enough that I knew I needed to last only a few moments. Without warning, a foot planted itself against my ribs, driving me against the hard rocks and slimy mud of the stream bed. I clawed at it, and Dagmira caught my hands. No, just my right hand, and she was prying at my fingers. I would have screamed at her if my head weren't under water. Just before I could be certain she was trying to murder me, though I realized what she was after. My wedding ring. The water had to touch everything. The ring had not been off my finger since Jacob placed it on there, but right then it was standing between me and the chance to breathe again. I did not think he would begrudge its brief absence. I let Dagmira take the ring and dropped my arms beneath the water again. Her foot vanished, and a moment later, when I truly could not stay down any longer, I floundered to the surface. Blessed air, rushed into my lungs. Then Dagmira helped me to my feet. I needed the aid. Every part of me seemed to have gone numb, and I was shaking so badly that I surely would have fallen. The clothing Jacob thrust into the tent was not my own. I could not have gotten such closely tailored garments on just then, and they had all gotten soaked besides. The robe Dagmira flung over my head was soon the same way, but it was thick wool, warm even when wet. She then helped me from the tent and back up onto the shore, where Menchem finished his prayers with the holy gesture. At that moment, I did not care in the slightest what spiritual benefit I might have gained from the exercise. I was in sunlight and no longer in the stream. All to the good, but the wind cut like a knife. The sooner I got indoors, the better. I stumbled badly trying to walk until Jacob took the simple expedient of picking me up and carrying me onward. You don't have to do that, I said, my chattering teeth contradicting my body, which was more than glad to curl against his chest. I felt the quick jerk of his laugh. Nonsense. Carrying you helps warm me up. We both benefit. Who could argue with that? My wet hair was the worst, holding the chill long after my body had started to recover. Jacob and I huddled under the blankets of our bed until I had stopped shaking. Then he went out again. I remained there a while longer, feeling like a small child in winter, reluctant to leave my cocoon. Finally, I forced myself out, pinned my hair up in a messy knot that at least would not freeze my back, and went downstairs. Jacob came through the front door as I did. Wilker and Menchem are off with Astoria to guide them, he said, to my questioned look. Astoria has been to the Boyer's lodge before and knows the way. I will give the priest this much. When I pointed out that Lord Hilford would be on his way back by the time Wilker caught him, and then it would be days yet before they got back here, he immediately insisted on going with them. Jacob snorted with quiet laughter. I should like to be there to see Hilford's expression when Wilker tells him he has to be dunked in a mountain stream. Lord Hilford was not a religious man. He joined us in our studies on Sabbath night, but only because he would spend the night reading anyways. But I hoped, with the superstitious chill that had been plaguing me since the previous night, that he would cooperate. Will they be safe? I asked, rubbing my arms for warmth. I don't want this Zagret Mott business. Oh, I don't mean this Zagret Mott business. Well, that too, but from the dragons. They're armed, Jacob said, and know to keep an eye out. It's safe as they can. It's as safe as they can be, short of hiding indoors. He had a point. There had been no trouble in the village, perhaps because there were so many people. Predators often prefer lone prey, but anyone who ventured beyond its boundaries was at risk. Mr. Wilker was likely safer than if he were going out with Jacob for research. I was selfishly glad my husband would not be leaving the village, and yet how could we answer our questions and fulfill my promise to Dagmira and Chatzel without risking ourselves in the field? We would have to dare it eventually, and as much as I wished to pretend otherwise, we had to do it soon. Chapter 16. Idle bands, an odd circle, plans for investigation, and Dagmira's family. Let's see. Okay. With both of the other gentlemen gone, Jacob was at loose ends. We tried to talk to the villagers, but none of them wanted to come near him until they knew whether the evil of Zangrit Mott had been banished. Back home in Pastureway, he would have passed the time answering his correspondence, but the difficulty in receiving mail in Drusenev meant no one was writing to us. I recognized the signs of frustrated idleness and took steps to mitigate it. I had, as originally advertised, been filing the gentleman's notes. It was a more haphazard affair than I would have liked, though because I had never done such work before and had no system, together Jacob and I went through the pages, discussed what we had learned, and writing fair copies of many things that had been jotted down in a messy scrawl. It was tedious work, but at the same time it gave me a deep, wordless pleasure. I remembered the naive girl that had stood in the king's menagerie, never dreaming that Jacob Camhurst would become her husband, but hoping he would be her friend. My naivete had been vindicated. We were friends now, in what I thought of at the time as a queerly masculine way. Ladies did not have these sort of conversations, speculating on how the daytime torpor of winter hibernation of rockworms allowed those enormous predators to survive without eating anything in sight. Oh, without eating everything in sight. Not with each other, nor with gentlemen either, who were not supposed to tax our minds with such weighty matters. The Amanda Lewises of the world will say that is not love, at least not of a romantic kind. I will grant that it certainly is not the sort one finds in plays and sensational novels, but that sort always seems to be the cause of, seems to be the causing trouble for everyone involved and the occasional innocent bystander. I thought so then and think so even more now, having seen that very principle in action. I argue to the contrary of Amanda and her ilk, that such a deep and pleasant rapport is love, the common thread that may link friends and relations and spouses, and furthermore, the mightiest torrents of passion. Without the thread woven into it is merely animal lust. Such were the thoughts filling the depth of my mind, while the surface occupied itself noting down changes on our map. Many of the layers marked by the smugglers had proved to be abandoned. Jacob and Mr. Wilker, in the course of their explorations, had found a handful more with new inhabitants within. Clearly the dragons had moved house, but why? I scowled down at the paper, for I had not thought to provide for alterations when I made my marks, overwriting Jacob's hasty pencil scratches in more careful ink. Finally, I blackened out the X's of empty layers until they were solid squares, and drew new X's where Jacob said they had found dragons unexpectedly in residence. I should like to know how long ago they started migrating, and where the rest of them have migrated to, I said, and he murmured in agreement. My eyes drifted over the revised map. If migration was occurring, I wondered whether there might be an underlying pattern, a certain distance traveled or a certain direction, which would help us understand the process and to find the remainder of the dragons. I did not see an answer to that question, but I saw something else. My finger traced an arc of layers curving around from east to south. It continued with interruptions, though through the west and north, with a diameter of several miles, not a perfect circle. But Jacob, I said, what's here? He leaned over and saw where my fingertip had rested. In the center of that circle, the map there was blank, entirely without layers, so far as we had recorded. There? Let's see. That's past the ravine, he shrugged. Nothing in particular that I can think of. You've been in there? Not yet, he said. Those layers you just marked are the farthest Wicker and I have been. It's a fair hike getting up there. So there could be something there that you haven't seen. Jacob sat back, frowning at me. Such as what? I'll grant you it looks odd, regular, but our map is hardly perfect. Some of our distances are wrong, and I'm sure we don't have all the layers. There might be one right in the middle of that apparent circle, which is one possible answer to your question, I pointed out. We think that rockworms are solitary, coming together only to mate, and that they have no hierarchy among themselves. What if we're wrong? What if there might be some kind of queen dragon layering there, and all the others are keeping their distance? Or it could be there are no suitable caves there. A fair point. The reason rockworms are found in clusters and fly such distances to hunt is because not all parts of the Vestrani highlands have caves that meet the dragon's needs, but that circle seems so very regular. Could it possibly be an accident? We're going to have to stop this here. We have been reading from A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent, and it is a book by Marie Brennan. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.